Ooh, Charlie Davies said, I have had enough of this. Maybe, you know what, Chuck may have been more entertaining to watch than the performance that we saw on the pitch as the tough times, they continue for Mauricio Pochettino and this U.S. men's national team. Since Poch's takeover, he holds a 9-1-7 record, all comps, but against FIFA's top teams, well, things are pretty bleak. The U.S. have not won or drawn a single team in FIFA's top 30, getting outscored 12-3 in such matches. Is this how all of you loved watching this game?
Oh my God. Chuck deserves an Emmy for this. Honestly, the drama that it added to that show.
It made it better that it was a corded headphone.
Yeah,
as well.
like you really saw the cord.
To get it off.
Got a little tangled, got out of it.
If there was one person that could have had that reaction and done it and really summarized what every U.S. men's national team fan is feeling right now, and I hope the players are feeling that based on the performance and the recent results, it's Charlie Davies. And I sympathize with what's going on the pitch, because when you're a player and there's a sense of confusion, I mean, there's confusion in terms of the tactics, there's confusion in terms of player selections, and now when I hear a manager, Mauricio Pochettino, give those post-match comments about the U.S. men's national team being better on a day that they were completely outclassed by South Korea in every single department, it now starts making me ask questions about the manager and kind of what his mentality is with the remaining months going into the World Cup.
It's like that meme where that lady's trying to do math in her head, all the like algebra, calculus, whatever. Yes. It's literally that when I hear Poch talk, because I'm thinking, did we watch
Nothing's
the
adding
same?
up, right?
Yeah, the math really ain't mathing with this. I don't know if we watched the same game. And you're right. I think all of the confusion, just it all leads to, does Poch really not know this team? I think now he's under fire because you're thinking, if you don't know the best players to bring in, you clearly don't know the system you're doing. We're not convinced on the tactics. Then it leads to the players not performing at their best. How do you go and perform confidently when your game plan isn't set, even just tactically? It's a whole hodgepodge of question marks now, I think, that are all directed at Poch.
Absolutely. And Aaron, we just saw some of those numbers. It's not been great. So is it safe to say that the U.S. are in a worse spot now under Poch than they were before he took over?
It is crazy to me to be able to say that I think they are in a worse spot, because at least before we kind of saw what Berhalter was trying to do. This is how he wants to play. These are the players he's going to use. These are the alternates. This is maybe how he switches up. We didn't like a lot of it, but we at least saw the plan. With Pochettino, I don't know what the plan is. If he had come in and said, we're going to play 3-5-2, we're going to do that. That's what we do. We're going to bring these players in. We're going to mix it up. We're going to maybe play 14 different lineups in 17 games, but to a point, I could understand it. What is the point? Where are we going with this? What are we supposed to be doing? What does he want them to do? Does he understand what he has? How long is it going to take him to get to understanding to what we have? And once he understands that, what does he want to do with them? We're 7 games out, 6 games out. Why haven't we figured this out yet? It's terrifying as a U.S. men's national team fan, because we don't know where this is going. And we're so close.
So close to the World Cup next summer. Well, to help us work through some of this confusion, let's bring in the Athletics senior soccer reporter, Paul Tenorio, to work through some of this. And Paul, you wrote a really great piece kind of talking about Poch's desire to mix things up and how it's seemingly backfired here now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. I do think there was a problem with this national team in terms of complacency, in terms of kind of this feeling that there were untouchables, guys who were always going to be in the national team no matter what their club performance was like, no matter how much they were playing. And there needed to be kind of a mentality change within the group so that guys down the depth chart felt like they had a chance to play their way in, so that guys who were the starters felt like they had to look over their shoulder. But the problem is, if you're Weston McKennie, for example, sitting at home, is anything you saw against South Korea making you look over your shoulder? Or are you sitting there saying, all right, like, call me when you're ready to have better performances in midfield? And I think that's the disconnect that's happening, is like, this is not a team that's got enough depth to create that level of competition. And we're too close to the World Cup to keep messing around with it.
Yeah, that's incredibly well said. And it's going to be a really difficult rest of the way here, Paul, in 2025, because the U.S. have some big tests coming up to kind of get a sense of where this team is at. So what are you anticipating coming up against Japan tomorrow, but then against opposition like Ecuador, Australia, Paraguay, and Uruguay, who kind of close out the 2025 campaign for the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, I'm almost ready to set tomorrow aside and just say, okay, I expect something very similar to South Korea, because the group we have here is the group we have here. What we see in October for me is going to set the tone for how I talk about Mauricio Pochettino, how I talk about the World Cup. If we don't see the full group in October, I think there are real red flags, real problems here, because this U.S. team needs to be ready for the World Cup, and you need to get the full squad back. And there are a lot of players that are missing. So in October, I want to see Anthony Robinson back at left back. I want to see Weston McKennie and Johnny Cardoso and Yunus Musa back in the squad, creating competition in midfield. You know, I want to see, hopefully, Ricardo Pepi healthy enough to come in with Balogun and with Josh Sargent, so we have the full striker pool. I want to see Matt Turner back in. I want to see Chris Richards in the starting lineup. You know, we need to get these name players back in the group, create the real competition, and start to see the full squad on the field in October and see how they perform. And to Aaron's point, see how they want to play. You know, right now the system is scrambled. It's different. You know, the Gold Cup system was different than the system we saw the other day. They switched to a 5-man backline halfway through the game. I don't think they've trained that much. We have to start to get the starters back in, and we need to get the system down. That's critical in October. So for me, what happens in October is much more important than what we see tomorrow night, just because I think it's time to move forward, stop the experimentation, and get ready for the World Cup.
Paul, I can't help but compare this window to the Emma Hayes era, where she came in crunch time with a new team, brought in a ton of young players, but clearly had a system and tactics set in play. Do you think that that's just what we're missing from Poch? Because from a player standpoint, it seems like everybody's on a different page on the pitch.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, you know, but for me, it's the tactics is kind of like part B, because the squad has changed so much, you know, players coming in, players going out. And I understand, again, the reasoning behind it. You know, there was this sense around the group that these players are going to be in the squad no matter what. And that does affect the mentality of the rest of the pool. It does affect kind of the competition within the group. And I admire the fact that he tried to change that. I just think it hasn't really worked to the desired effect. And so the first things first is, like, get your full squad in, find new ways to motivate these players, right? Like, your job is to bring them in and make them think that they have something bigger to play for. And then at that point, yes, like, we need to understand how this team wants to attack, how this team wants to defend. And you hear players say a lot, like, Pochettino's focus tactically is very much more on how do we defend. You know, when the U.S. has the ball, he wants to give them some freedom to be creative. And I think that's good to a certain extent, but there also needs to be an idea of, like, this is the system, this is how we build out. And then when you get to the final third, that's on you. And I just think there hasn't been enough continuity for tactics to even start to be a part of the equation yet.
Paul, when the losses pile up, when the tactics go out the window, when the players get disillusioned, problems start occurring. So I'm going to ask you the question that's going on in group chats, that's going on behind the scenes, that a lot of U.S. men's national team fans are beginning to ask, and I'm going to be very blunt about it. At what point does Mauricio Pochettino's job come under fire? And at what point does he potentially not become U.S. men's national team manager should losses continue to pile up going into a World Cup?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I don't know that we could get to that point. Like, I honestly, like, there's so little time left. It was a weird time when he got hired, right? It was like there was enough time to mess around, but also it feels like not enough time because the World Cup was around the corner. And that little in-between zone has allowed this kind of interim period of experimentation that I think basically went one window too far. Like, how different would the conversation be if the guys that he was talking about bringing back into the squad after the South Korea game were already here this month? Like, I think holding this all the way to September, this experimentation, was the mistake. Like, people are not down for experimentation right now. Like, everyone's thinking about next summer, trying to get excited. I don't know that U.S. soccer has the luxury to pull the plug on this. You know, at this point now, you've got October and November and March to get ready before the pre-World Cup camp. That's not a lot of time. You know, I would guess maybe you could do it after the March window and just say, like, okay, let's just find somebody who can come in, who knows the team and is just going to do a World Cup. That would probably be the best case if you're going to change coaches. But I think this is what the U.S. has. And that's why I think October is such an important window to see who Pochettino brings in and what the squad looks like once the full strength team is here, or if they're here.
Paul, Pochettino said that he sees better results ahead. He sees a brighter future for this team. My question is when, number one. And my question for you is, do you see better results ahead for this team? Do you have a positive outlook moving forward?
I'm trying to be positive. Like, I felt like my column was like the most positive that I could be, right? Like, I do think that we have to acknowledge there are important players missing from this team right now. So if you bring them back, and if you can motivate them, then yes, I think the results can get better. Like, this U.S. team will be better with Anthony Robinson at left back than it will with Max Arston. Like, this U.S. team will be better with Weston McKennie in midfield rather than Sebastian Berhalter. Like, that's just the reality of the quality of the pool. So once you get those guys in, I do think the results can get better. But I am just confused as to how motivated Mauricio Pochettino feels to actually get those players back in the squad. And so that's my hesitancy right now, is like, how much do you still not trust those guys? Because, you know, anyone who's been in a team knows coaches have favorites, coaches have guys they trust. And I think the Gold Cup did allow Pochettino to build some trust with some players. But the problem is, I don't know that those players are the guys that can win you games at the World Cup. So the trust needs to be built back up with some of the players that I'd like to see back in the camp in October. And until I see those guys in, my optimism is going to stay at a 2, not at an 8 or a 9.